Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is David. So David, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Yeah, totally, for sure. Thank you so much for having me on, by the way. So I actually live in Israel. So today is a very happy day for the time that we're recording the show. So I work with first-time CEOs, hyper-growth founders, people that are, succeeding, very successful in what they're doing. And then suddenly they're like finding them that they're hitting this invisible ceiling. Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed, burned out. They're not really aligned with what they're doing anymore. Like they have a passion and a vision, and it's just not really what they're doing every day anymore. And to stop feeling that way, maybe they're micromanaging. Maybe they don't feel like they have that executive presence that they wish they had. And I help them to lead with calm authority. I have a proprietary framework. It's called the Adaptive Intelligence Framework, and I help walk them through it. And people have found a lot of peace in their leadership as they grow internally.
Awesome. So I'm just curious more about your background. Like, how did you kind of get into this? Like, what kind of led to this business?
Yeah, totally. I actually started in education, and in education, it's a lot of, behavioral influence, behavioral change. I started by helping children really notice and shift their patterns around their identity and the way that they show up. And I realized as I grew into leadership myself, teaching is leadership. That's the truth. Not to put down any teachers at all, because teaching is an incredibly difficult profession. But as I moved into leading adults, I grew into being an assistant principal and a principal. And I realized that a lot of times, and not speaking specifically about anyone, but adults never really learned how to grow from the inside out either, to really notice their own identity patterns and to change those. So really that's what I do right now, where I work with founders and executives and people that are shifting their identity patterns around the way that they show up.
Got it. And so I guess in terms of like the founders and executives that you work with, like what do you say is like the best fit for someone to get value from what you do? It's like a certain, industry, vertical, company size. Like what do you kind of look for in terms of how this, this person could be a great fit and benefit from? Yeah.
That's a great question. So I've worked with people really across the board. I like to work with entrepreneurs and people that are founders in the tech space, people that maybe have already funding and product market fit, and they're growing their teams and their organizations right now. And they're just not really caught up internally to that shift that they really need to make. And maybe they feel like, they have to build out an organizational structure, or they have to they're feeling like they're burning out. And it really, really all comes down to an internal way that you show up, and really can fit anyone as they grow externally and help them to grow internally.
Makes sense. So I guess in terms of like just diving deeper, right? If you can talk about maybe without even mentioning someone's name or a company name, just like an example of somebody who you work with and kind of what's some of that transformation look like?
Yeah, totally. So most of the people that I work with actually, they want to stay on the side and private, but I can tell you that I've worked with actually freelancers, people that, let's say, they wanted to scale their consulting business. So that's an example of someone that I just worked with recently, that she was growing her consulting business, and we completely revamped the entire approach that she was taking, where she was working, in the business, and I helped her to really make that internal shift to work on the business. There was a COO of a real estate firm where he was completely burned out, completely. He was just like, I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing anymore. I just want to stay home, be with my kids. And I was just like, okay, cool. Let's dive deep and let's figure out what's going on. And through the work that we did, he realized that, he was micromanaging. And then on the flip side, he was feeling guilty about it. And he wasn't feeling happy about that. So then he would totally let go of everything. And that was causing him also guilt. So it was just a cycle of just really not feeling happy and not really feeling fulfilled and just burning out over what he was doing. And then through our work, he was able to really find a very healthy balance for how he was showing up at work. And then he was able to take time off whenever he felt like it. He didn't feel guilty about it. And he actually really scaled recently. Like I've been following him on LinkedIn, and he's just been doing really well. And I'm really happy for him. Like he's doing really great.
For sure. And I guess like for somebody who's like in that position, right? Somebody who's in the business, stressed out, overworked, I feel like it is common, right? Because you said for entrepreneurs and for many people who are in that situation, sometimes like it's hard to look up or even think about, okay, that I'm actually having this problem. This is like a mistake. So how do you kind of get somebody to realize and say, hey, listen, like, this is probably not the way that you want to keep working?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's actually very interesting because the culture of today is like really like into like hustle culture. And yeah, you just need to try harder and you just need to be motivated more. And like, it's a certain way of being where we don't really take the time to be self-aware. And we're just like, yeah, we just need better strategies, or we just need to work harder. And I'm not going to mention any names, but there are people that are promoting that heavily, on social media. And that's an unhealthy approach to growth. It might work for some people as they're the opposite and they don't do much. So then you tell them, yeah, just keep going. And that like brings them to the opposite extreme. And yes, they'll be more successful than if they did nothing. But people that are successful and people that are growing, and the answer to, oh, I'm burning out, or oh, I feel like I just need a better strategy, is work harder, be more strategic. Like those things just mean nothing. They're just overwhelming and causes a lot of shame, unfortunately. And really, it's really about self-awareness, learning more about yourself, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Do you need to supplement your weaknesses with other people? Do you need to learn how to navigate through your weaknesses to make them into strengths? Are you feeling overwhelmed because you have, emotions around different things? And I know that I'm going into like a lot of like psychological speak, and there is a lot of cross, through that. I've done a lot of my own work, within therapy and things like that. I'm not a psychologist at all, but there's a lot of overlap as well, where it's just like, it's not about acting a certain way. You just need to become something new. And that takes a lot of work. And most people don't realize that that's the work they have to do. And instead they just build a lot around themselves without doing that work. And then they become the bottleneck and they become the thing holding everything back without even realizing it.
For sure. And I guess like for that balance, right? I mean, obviously balance looks different for different people, but I guess like from your perspective, or from like, what you've seen, does that just mean like working 40 hours a week, or does that mean, like what does that look like for a founder?
That's a really good question, because everyone is different. And there are some people that it's also about what your goals are. Like some people, they don't want to work a lot and they want to set up automated systems and processes. These days, that's a boom for them, with AI and all that stuff. And there are some people that like to work and, like maybe they don't have a family with kids right now and they want to get, work hard and be productive and do a lot. And they could work for 10, 12, 13, 14 hours a day. And that's totally fine for them. And they're not burning out because they're enjoying it. So really, it just matters what matters and what's important and what you value. It all changes based on who you are and what you're working on. But the primary thing that I would say to specifically answer your question would be, a balance is something that you feel happy and you feel fulfilled and you feel like you're achieving what you want to be achieving. And it's not like a burden and it's not feeling heavy on you. And it's not like I have to do this or I have to do that. And it's more like, of course I'm going to do that because I love it and I love doing that. And if I don't love it, then I learn why. And I see if as I mentioned earlier, like maybe I have to hire someone, or maybe I have to learn more about myself to see, am I not interested? For example, I had a conversation. I didn't even work with this person. I just had one conversation with the guy. The guy runs an operations consultants. And he was just like, yeah, I have customers, but like, it's just hard for me to like really get out there and make these phone calls. And we just had a conversation around that. And what came out of that was just, yeah, he just didn't want to feel that rejection, which, of course, yeah, that's a very common feeling for people there, but he didn't notice that in himself. He was just like, yeah, I'm just working on this and working on that. I just don't have time. That's how he presented. And then one conversation, I was just like, yeah, maybe, to consider that. And I gave him a couple of tips about how to approach that. And like a week later, he was just like, dude, I'm just like making phone calls and it's all good. And it's amazing. And I was like, awesome. So happy for you, and it's just a tiny bit of self-awareness where it suddenly just can change everything. And it's not about, a huge mindset shift. It's not it's not necessarily about something like that where it's grand. It's something sometimes super simple, and we just don't see it because it's us. It's hard to see ourselves.
Right. So you're saying it's just kind of mentally sometimes, even sort of just like reframing things, right? Where it might seem like, okay, this is something that you might enjoy the overall business, but, kind of just to your point earlier that there are certain aspects that you just don't want to do. Like you said, for example, making cold calls, maybe other things, tax things. There's so many different things you have to do as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So like in terms of, when you're working with people, obviously earlier that you mentioned that you're in Israel. So what does that look like? Like are most of your clients also like in Israel, or do you work with people in the US? Like what does that breakdown kind of look like for you?
So the vast majority of my clients are in the US. I only recently moved to Israel. I've been meeting a lot of people in Israel and getting to learn this side of the world. And it's a very different culture and it's super exciting for me personally. I love it. I love learning and I love meeting new people. And you would think, you think I'm extroverted. I'm actually not. I'm actually pretty introverted and I typically don't like talking, but I just learning and meeting new people. It's a whole new space and a whole new culture and it's really, really fun. But right now, actually, primarily it's the United States.
Awesome. And I guess like when it comes to working with people in the US, actually living abroad, I believe it's like an 8-hour time difference. How do you kind of balance and manage that?
It's interesting because there are a lot of Americans that live, a lot of Anglos and specifically Americans in this time difference that live in Israel. And there's like this whole subculture of people that work, 9 to 5 Eastern time or even Pacific time, which is pretty challenging, but even Eastern time where it becomes sort of like, 8 to 3. And then 8 to 3 is not so bad, like 8 to 3 equals in Israel time, it's 3 to 10 p.m. So it's like
Right.
you have this afternoon hour job, the afternoon shift, evening shift. And then the morning is actually, you get to spend time with your family. You get to hang out if you have friends or spouse or whatever it is. And you just have the whole morning now till 3 o'clock. Maybe you can, take a nap before work and, to supplement exactly how it works. I know people, sometimes, some days personally for me, I'm going till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Just happens to be the way it is. And I'm sure people that live in America working with Americans are working till 1 or 2 in the morning. So it's not really crazy, But typically it's, nowadays with Zoom and virtual, it's pretty simple. And a lot of times people don't even know where I live. And it doesn't matter to me. If you ask, I tell. And I've only rarely had people that were critical about it, let's say, where they were like negative to where I live. Most people are super gracious and people just want to meet people. And if you can help, then amazing.
Exactly. Yeah. Like it's all about results. I think especially to come to your point, Dave, in 2025, those things people don't really care about as much. So in terms of like your business, obviously, right now we're kind of like at the halfway point of 2025. So what are some of your biggest goals and objectives that you're kind of looking towards for the rest of this year?
So it's very interesting. Right now, I'm at a crossroads for myself. Personally, it's because I've been getting asked to do a lot of supplemental projects, not specifically coaching. And that's a thing that I'm working through. So for example, like I've been asked to do strategy, marketing, branding, positioning, things like that, where there's more tactical, which is not something that I've usually been doing. And I've been exploring those. So like if somebody asks, so then I have conversations around it and see if it's something that really works for me too. Because I personally, even though the tactical strategy is exciting and fun, it doesn't leave me as fulfilled because I really like to get to those, those moments where I don't know if you've ever heard this term, like, the aha moment, right? Like teachers love that word. It's like that aha moment, where you're working with someone and they're like, oh, wow. Yeah. Or like when someone tells me, that's a great question. And then they just sit quietly for like 30 seconds. It's like, yeah, that's what we're doing. Like that's the work that I like to do. That makes me feel excited. So it's something that I'm, just curiously exploring as opposed to like, yeah, I'm actively now going to rebrand and be like, I'm a full service, agency. No, I don't think so. Not right now. But, I'm open to, learning new people's what they need and things like that.
Makes sense. So if you could go back in time to before you started this business, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew?
That's a great question. But I'm going to go with my intuition, meaning I'm not going to sit and think for 30 seconds. I'm just going to go right out. I'm going to say the greatest piece of advice that I could tell myself would be to really just be extremely open and flexible to what people are telling you. And I know in the startup world, it's like really common, there's like a very famous thing that people tell founders, like stop working on your product before you speak to anyone. And like I've iterated so many times before I found, what people value, what I'm offering. I've went through so many different iterations. Like if LinkedIn profile page had like a history, and you can see the different offers that I was offering, and they all revolved in a similar way around coaching. But it was, who was I working with? What was I doing with them? What my offers were, how I was approaching it. It was all my own growth, to get there. And you don't really want to hang on too tight if you see that something's not working. So if something starts to work, you want to like double down on that and really get and push in there. And that's, I guess, going back to when you asked me, like, what am I doing now for the second half of the year? I was like, I'm curiously open to seeing what people, that's really where it is. Like, I'm not married to something specific. I just want to help people, right? Like, in any way that I can help people, if someone comes to me and says, can you help? I'll be like, let's see. Like if I can help, I would love to help. So let's just have a conversation and see if I can help. So that would be, I guess, the advice that it took me a while to learn, and I'm happy that I've learned it. So the truth is, though, going back, like, would I change anything? I don't know, because like I learned a lot, in marketing and branding and positioning and things like that I maybe would not have learned if I wasn't so deep in the weeds. I'm going through this process, but I would tell that to people. So like, I guess I would tell it to myself, because if I would tell it to people, I have to be able to tell it to myself.
For sure. Well, that's good advice. So like on that note, if somebody's watching this show and if they wanted to work with you, wanted to reach out to you, do you mind sharing your website, social media, I guess best ways to get in contact?
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn is the best way. My LinkedIn tab is always open, even if I'm not, on LinkedIn. It's just sitting there in the corner. And then like after like a couple of numbers go up on the top, I'll just like move over to there and see what's happening. So LinkedIn, definitely David Azerad on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive, I would say. I post very, very often, I would say almost every day, every weekday at least. Sometimes it's, different insights, values, sometimes just random, what I'm experiencing that day. And, a nice combination. And always happy to chat, always happy to help in any way. That's what I'm here to help. And if I can help in a way that's in a more formal capacity, fantastic. If I can help in a less formal capacity where it's like, having just conversations and bouncing things off of me, also amazing. I love doing that. And that's just what I'm here for. Like that's my mission, is just to help as many people as I can to become the best that they can be at what they do.
Awesome. Well, you hear that, guys? Reach out to David on LinkedIn, and see if he can help you. David, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate being on, and you asked some great questions.